Oh, God.
Geralt, what are you doing?
Fish tack.
What the fuck? Good game design in its simplest terms means that the rules, mechanics, and gameplay of whatever game we're talking about, I don't know, Solitaire, works well and as intended by the developers. Solitaire on Windows XP is an example of impeccable game design. It takes place on a tabletop that is a darkish lime green, which conveniently contrasts the red on the cards, since green is the complementary color to red on the color wheel. When you boot up Solitaire, you play Solitaire, and it is to the core brilliant game design. And that was my mom's gameplay, by the way. I don't know how to play Solitaire. The simpler the game, the easier it is to design it, and that's why things get mucky really quick when you turn my mother's virtual drug substitute into a full-blown open-world experience with hundreds of characters, animals, cars,
Weapons, cutscenes, clothes, missions.
GTA Online is one of the biggest games ever, and it absolutely stinks from a game design standpoint. Grand Theft Auto Online advertises itself as a game about stealing cars, robbing banks, and living the life as a straight-up terrorist, but it's actually about delivering pizzas and gambling until you can scrounge up enough money for a 2009 Honda Civic. The process of booting up GTA and actually getting into the online mode takes about 3 to 4 minutes, and when you get into the meat of it and take part in the game's core mechanics, you'll realize that it's extremely janky. Shooting people in Grand Theft Auto Online, which is what most people buy the game for, feels like shooting at a soggy mattress. Let's see how many bullets it takes to kill a regular dude. It's not just the enemy's health bars that are inflated, but so is the price on every item available. With overpowered super weapons, like the Oppressor and Mobile Operations Center being priced so high only experienced players can buy them, new GTA players are cooked whenever they get into a public lobby. There's cutscenes, mission descriptions, and a bajillion characters that call you, but everything can and will be played out of order, so none of that even matters, but Rockstar still shoves it on the player anyways. The matchmaking system is unbelievably outdated for a multi-billion-dollar game, and the servers have frequent disconnection issues. Grand Theft Auto Online, from a long-time fan's perspective, is a game that has the skeleton of Grand Theft Auto. However, it's covered up by paywalls, loading screens, hackers, and marketing decisions that benefit shareholders over the general player base. GTA 4's design focused on slowing down the GTA formula to immerse players in the action and consequence of rampant violence. GTA 5's design focused on accelerating the formula in a large space to give players as much freedom as possible while providing a lighthearted, comedic, yet cinematic narrative. GTA Online's design isn't anything that could be put into a sentence. It's a collage of whatever will look best on the next marketing poster, and it is to the core bad game design. Battlefield 1 was a first-person shooter set in World War I that took a jab at realism in an attempt to simulate what the battlefield would have felt like. When spectating other players, you see their desperate movements for survival, and backing them is the sounds of war, gunshots, vehicles, and destruction. The shooting is punchy, the vehicles drive smooth, and the campaign, while not EA's main focus, was still really good in all the stories it told. Battlefield 1 doesn't just flesh out the way guns shoot, it brings everything to life to create a true World War I-esque experience. So getting into the thick of it, good game design is when a game can fully explore every mechanic that it introduces. When a game can execute a seamless experience that keeps you involved and not just immersed in segments while it tries to catch up to itself. And in this video, I will be breaking down the fundamentals of good game design using The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt and comparing it to other AAA titles.
What's your name?
Steingrim.
Well, Steingrim, I don't like you. In fact, I feel like slapping you.
The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is an open-world action-adventure game, and there's one thing that open-world games are all about. Side content. Riding off the beating path in search of new adventure. A lot of studios will jump at every chance to make an open world game, but will fold when it actually comes to making an open world. In Far Cry 5, the side content consists of shooting at people in hideouts, collecting lighters, and finding cult towers. The icons on your map urging you to stop the main story in search of more undiscovered mysteries is nothing more than a checklist mimicking real content. Halo Infinite suffers a similar issue, and I believe both games would benefit if the developers spent time fleshing out the core missions instead of attempting a soulless open world.
Get me out of here. Thank you so much.
Contact!
Fire! Watch out!
The first side mission in The Witcher 3 that showed me just how deep of an RPG it was when I visited a haunted tower where a ghost told me to bring her bones to her boyfriend that abandoned her during a pillage. I brought her bones to him and then heard a shriek upon my departure. and it turned out that she was actually a pesta, a demon that personifies disease. Bringing her bones to Graham, her boyfriend, results in the demon cursing the countryside and killing even more people, and of course, I was floored that this was the result of the side quest. So I looked up if there was an alternate option, and you can actually bring Graham to the tower the demon inhabits and change the outcome of the quest, that being they're reunited in the afterlife and the demon finds peace. Another interesting detail in this quest is that in Graham's shack, you can see a noose, which obviously shows that Graham has a lot of guilt for what happened. This is just one of the many side quests in The Witcher 3, and it has symbolism, a twist, multiple outcomes, and used the in-game lore to accomplish its narrative. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt had a budget of $81 million, while Grand Theft Auto 5 had a budget of $265 million. So let's compare side missions from both games. In Michael's variant of the Grassroots mission, he smokes a fat one that was given to him by a guy on the street. He hallucinates aliens, and it's a really funny mission while you try to take them all down, but the thing is, the mission doesn't have a lot of depth to it. You shoot at aliens and that's that. There's nothing that can change depending on how the player executes it, so the next time you go to play Grand Theft Auto 5, you're not getting anything fresh from it. While it's common knowledge that Red Dead Redemption 2 struggles with this as well, Rockstar did fix this problem in a few of the side missions. Take one of the first loaning missions that Strauss gives you.
Can I do something for you?
You chick? I was told I could find a Chick Matthews up here.
Chick Matthews? Might want to talk to that fella over there.
You Chick Matthews?
Oh, no, not me, sir. That's the greenhorn over there. Oh, and there he goes.
So long, long shark.
Damn it!
Well, I don't know anything about that.
I didn't mention the dead Chick Matthews. Get back! You owe us money!
God dang it. This map will take you to the money.
You're lucky I ain't taking your teeth as well.
Back to The Witcher 3 though. Even the quests that appear to be basic checklist open world fluff innovate and separate themselves from the rest of the game. The Fists of Fury questline takes Geralt around the world to become the ass-whooping champion of Skellige, Novigrad, and Velen. The first one I went to, I was tasked to fight a struggling fisherman, and he begged me to take the fall so he could use the winnings to sustain himself. And of course, me being the loving Witcher I am, said, "Fuck no," and I beat his broke ass suit. But it's so cool that the choice was still there. That feature was not only there to provide more replayability for the game, but it also cleverly used gameplay to convey what poverty in the Velen region is actually like. The Nilfgaardian War left the region extremely broke, with farming being the primary source of income for most of the settlers. I picked up a Witcher contract to kill a fogling, and after hunting the creature down and smiting it like an absolute champ, I returned to the contractor for my reward and had to wait a week for him to actually build up the money to pay me. What's even more interesting is that I was given a choice to press him for the money immediately or wait for him to build up enough to sustain himself as well as reward me. CD Projekt Red, the team behind The Witcher 3, doesn't just use random letters found in cabinets to build lore, but uses gameplay to execute their vision, which is impeccable game design. Where The Witcher 3's world building shines brightest is when the player arrives in the free city of Novigrad. Prior to the arrival, you have a few run-ins with worshippers of the Eternal Fire, a fictional religion in the Witcher universe. The Eternal Fire's belief system is that there's safety in the Eternal Fire's flame, and any non-human is not welcome in its grace. Similar to real-life religions, the hostility of its members depends completely on where you are in the world. If you're in southern Velen, chances are members of the faith won't hassle you too much, but if you're in Novigrad, the big city that's run by the temple, you can expect a lot of aggression from the civilians because you play as a Witcher, aka a mutated human.
Be on your way.
Not only does the population in-game gossip about the hostility of the religion, but you actually see it firsthand, and not just in story-driven cutscenes. When exploring the city, I bumped into a priest who started antagonizing me because I was a Witcher. I decided to tell him off by asking him, "How many lives have you saved?" After this random encounter, I never expected to hear anything about it again. I mean, it wasn't story-related, and like most video games, it was probably just a silly open-world way of telling the player, "Hey, the Eternal Fire's priests are super aggressive, by the way." But a few in-game days later, I was jumped by two of the church's men because they heard that I spoke dishonorably to one of the priests. Again, this wasn't even story-driven. This was completely optional stuff. They asked for my weapons, and because I tried to be a pacifist, I handed them over, and then, only then, did they switch up their nice-ish guy act and try to kill me in the street while I was disarmed. It's subtle, but it's cool that the church's goons confiscated my weapons before moving in for the attack, because it just goes to show how slippery that church is, not having any care for honor or fairness, pure racism and power disguised as eternal life for humankind. Let's compare this to Grand Theft Auto V's Martin Madrazo. In the early game, the cartel kingpin Martin Madrazo is introduced as this threatening, rich super weapon with strings and connections all over Los Santos. With Michael, one of the protagonists, owing him a bunch of money, he's pretty intimidating for that initial encounter. But following the first heist, he's never referenced in a terrifying light again. In the cutscenes, the characters are like, "Oh man, you owe Martin Madrazo money. Oh man, Martin Madrazo, you kidnapped Martin Madrazo's wife. Oh god, man, Martin Madrazo." But you never see Martin Madrazo do anything remotely vindictive, and the last encounter you have with him is him sucking up to Trevor after returning his wife. The characters never talk about him again, and there's nothing in the world showing any glimpse of his violence or power. You can't just build a believable world by saying something is what it is. You need to show the player proof outside of scripted missions that whatever thing it is, a character, a religion, a concept, is shaping the virtual world around them. The eternal fire is everywhere, but Martin Madrazo really only exists in cutscenes and is nowhere to be found in the open world. Good world building, bad world building. But aside from the world building, The Witcher 3 excels at pulling the player into its fantasy setting. And it's not so much that the graphics are extremely realistic, but instead that the art direction stays true to the game's core themes. The human characters, while taking inspiration from realism, are still mildly stylized. Take Dijkstra, for example. He's a serious, passive-aggressive, but intelligent man that the player first encounters in Novigrad. His character traits are reflected in his physical appearance. His frown, nose, and eyebrows are very prominent, and his tight outfit over his large torso convey a comically threatening look. And aside from the characters, the environment doesn't resemble a middle ground between point A and point B, a backdrop that the player can look at while focusing on the main objectives. It instead acts as a space that's filled with life and not just props. Trees and grass dramatically bend and creak in the wind, and depending on the weather, the vegetation will behave differently as well. Something I noticed about Novigrad is that a lot of the buildings aren't mathematically sound. Their structure is crooked, and there's one building that's clearly slanted, and it's even enterable so you can see what it's like on the inside. In most games, to avoid clipping issues, developers will have their cities flat, but Novigrad is so dimensional. There's tunnels, canals, a ton of enterable interiors, miscellaneous quests, and distinct themes for each of the city's districts. It's these perfect imperfections that bring the world to life and help separate it from a lot of other open world games out there. It's not that The Witcher 3 is the best textures, water effects, physics, and lighting. It's that the developers use their budget to strategically craft a believable fantasy world by prioritizing art direction over graphical fidelity. And as somebody that always stops to embrace the little things,
I like your fat rump.
What the fuck?
The Witcher is just one of those games that constantly has me postponing the main objective so I can watch some geese waddle around me, look into the eyes of a cool bird, or even pick up my jaw after seeing the ray-traced water reflections for the millionth time. My favorite horror game, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, is a tense, slow-paced battle royale game. And while it's like crack to me, there is no passion or creativity in the game's graphics. The forests are decorated with the same grass that appears everywhere else on the map, and there's no weeds, clusters of baby trees, or variety in tree types in sight. The colorful skins and guns that most players sport contradict the way that the gameplay feels and doesn't work in harmony whatsoever. The tension that every PUBG match has is unique to that game, and the gunplay is really good. But the lack in passion when it comes to the game's visuals, in my opinion, hurts the experience. If PUBG had dense forested areas that limited players' vision, slowed them down, and caused them to make more noise when navigating it, that would be a drastically cooler and innovative little section of the map, opposed to everything being the same in every direction. Occasionally, when riding through Velen in The Witcher 3, I'll find a beautifully painted house that stops me in my tracks to snag a screenshot every single time.
War never changes.
And while it may not seem like a big deal, variety in environmental visuals is super important and can benefit any game. And while we're on the concept of competitive multiplayer, dare I even say Fortnite? Fortnite's bold text in the menus and matches makes it so no matter what's happening, you can always navigate your inventory and settings with ease. Different areas on the map have different gimmicks that switch up the gameplay, and because everything looks goofy and everything's colorful, it's consistently true to itself. Even the loading screens are nice to look at before each match just because of how many there are. And hey, speaking of loading screens, shout out to the best loading screen to ever grace gaming kind. Every loading screen in The Witcher 3 summarizes the last few key points of the main story in a 2D illustration. Being an open world game, a lot of people will probably do side stuff and not remember anything about the main quest, so it was very clever of CD Projekt Red to give players this convenient reminder of what's going on every time they boot up the game. Putting that aside, the stylized swamps, farmland, and cities, Holy fuck, I love Novigrad. Give every area in The Witcher a unique special feeling, and just goes to show that real artistic vision does make a difference. The cutscenes in particular are a great example of what good artistic vision is. Like Skyrim, Borderlands, and the newer Assassin's Creed games, The Witcher 3 has automated cutscenes, meaning they're not completely handcrafted start to finish, and use a select amount of presets to accomplish their look. To put it as basic as possible, it just makes everything look like a Family Guy cutaway. In Skyrim, you might see a character smile and move their arms a little bit, but in The Witcher 3, the camera moves to different angles, characters lean on things, walk around, cross their arms, and a lot of the time the automation is replaced by little bits of handcrafted goodness to spice up the storytelling. Even newer games like Starfield don't experiment this much with balancing automation with animation. And even though The Witcher 3's cutscenes are certainly cheaper than Red Dead Redemption 2's, for example, they're innovative enough in their own design that separates them from most other games on the market. And that's the beauty of The Witcher 3's game design. CD Projekt Red signed up to make an open world game, and instead of prioritizing one thing over another, they fleshed out every single mechanic so that the art piece could reach its full potential. The storytelling, the side mission design, the environmental detail, the combat. Holy f*** the combat. The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim is an open-world action-adventure game all about forging your own path as the Dragonborn. You swing at frost trolls, execute dragons, duel bandits, and immerse yourself in the left-click button. Most fights in Skyrim depend entirely on what level you are versus what level your foe is. There's no dodging or parry system, so every fight looks exactly like this. Meanwhile, The Witcher 3's combat looks exactly like something you'd see in a cinematic trailer. Dodging your enemies' swings and kicking them off their guard needs to be calculated with their attacks to strike a fat shit down. To spice up the fight even more, Geralt can utilize his signs, and if used strategically, can give him a serious advantage, like using a magic trap plus Igni combo to set spectral enemies on fire. Combat in The Witcher doesn't feel barbaric and turn-based. It's more like a dance where you need to read your opponent and move fluently with them. It's less about your next move and completely about theirs. At one point, a group of bandits tried to attack me from horseback, and I struggled to hit them with my sword since they were moving so fast. So instead, I used Igni to force them off their horse, and once they were stunned from the fall, I made the finishing move. Every fight is strategy-based to an extent, and even the fist fighting feels fluent and fun. Then you go back to Skyrim, which has a beautiful-looking world, excellent missions, and impeccable customization, but for some reason, half-baked combat that leaves every fight feeling anticlimactic. I'll say it again. Good game design comes from titles that embrace everything they signed up for, and this applies for all kinds of art. Listen to this song. Little Just One N. Yeah, skirt. This is an example song. This is an example song that I'm making for a video. Let's go. Okay, so that bar was fire. It was peak music. So I, the creator, am wondering, do I copy and paste the guitar and drums to the next part so I have to work less, or do I make something completely new? Well, just repeating it again without the lyrics would be an easy way to reach that 3-minute sweet spot. This is an example song that I'm making for a video. Let's go. So that sounds okay, and it technically works, but what would make the music sound better is if I made something completely new for the next part to separate it from the rest of the song. That I'm making for a video, let's go. It's so emotional. Ah yes, The Witcher 3's graphics design is awesome, the storytelling is brilliant, and the combat is engaging. But as Peter Griffin once said,
What didn't you like about it?
It insists upon itself, Lois.
in the best way possible. The Witcher 3 insists on using its own fantasy creations to shape its narrative. Gambling in the game isn't the traditional dice, blackjack, and poker. It's entirely based around the in-universe card game Gwent. Almost every NPC with a name can and will play it with you, and outside of the minigame, you can collect cards and grow your little empire. Gwent doesn't just appear as a mechanic that feels separate from the rest of the game like a certain Martin Madrazo I mentioned earlier, or f***ing golf while I'm at it. But it's clear that Gwent is huge in the Witcher world because of how many times it comes up. Monster trade is quite common as a reward for the card game, and we see that with the Bloody Baron's Mutant and, of course, Dijkstra's Troll. I was doing a side quest where I attended a house party, and I got completely sidetracked because there were people playing Gwent on the sidelines. Usually in games like this, the mission is the mission, and very little will try to separate you from the objective, and I loved that this was in the game. Basic stuff that could exist in any RPG, like a speech level mechanic, is void in The Witcher 3, and is instead determined by your magic level in a specific sign that influences other people's minds when casted on them. I've gotten myself into so many confrontations just because I upgraded the crap out of my Axie sign.
Tell him I'll pay just as soon as palm trees sprout on Skellige.
Palm trees have sprouted on Skellige. Now pay up.
Even the seemingly generic open world tracking missions fit into the game's lore and have twists and gimmicks that make each one of them unique and worth the play. In the endgame universe, Witchers exist to hunt monsters. That's why they're mutated at a young age, so that their bodies can sustain more injuries. So the player can take contracts to hunt beasts for money. Geralt needs to stop and investigate each area before eventually reaching the combat segment. Open world action adventure games are the best kinds of titles to slow down the pace. Let the player take in the surroundings. Give room to ask extra questions and take part in every distraction. It creates a wonderful contrast in gameplay, with action and peace working together to create an engaging, immersive experience opposed to an objective-based checklist. The monsters in The Witcher 3 aren't traditional goblins and bandits like every other fantasy, which helps separate it even more. Rot fiends are these disgusting humanoid zombies that explode once damaged enough and can cause a chain reaction, and if handled strategically, can help win a lot of fights. Botchlings are monsters born from the fetuses of unborn children, and their purpose is to feast on pregnant women. Drowners live in the swamps and will hide in the water to get an edge on you. The coolest part of every enemy is that there's a section for each of them in the game's bestiary, which tells you what the enemies are weak to and some lore about their existence. The Witcher 3 insists upon itself. It incorporates its own original fantasy content to fill the world and doesn't just reskin every other open world game out there with its own alternatives. But breaking it all down, cavemaning this shit up, let's overview the fundamentals of a game. In its simplest terms, a game is a task that you try to win without losing. Losing needs to be detrimental so that the player can bask in the glory of a win. It's all about risk and reward, and The Witcher 3 is one of the few games I know that actually lets the player fail missions. There's a lot of moments in The Witcher 3 where you get to collect special one-time only Gwent cards, and if you fumble, that's it for your entire save file. You'll never be able to get that card. And outside of Gwent, some missions will just kill themselves if you progress the story without doing them, and you'll never be able to go back unless you load a previous save file, but come on, that's cheating! I will crawl through the screen and suck your fucking dick if I hear you doing that shit. I mean, I'll beat your ass. Another example of The Witcher's risk and reward system is the challenges, like horse riding, fist fighting, and Gwent. The player is given a choice in how many crowns, aka dollars, they want to throw into the match, and if the player loses, they lose their bet, but if they win, they receive their end and the opponent's money. It's a system as old as time, but used so frequently in The Witcher 3 that it encourages you to really try for that win. Bet all your crowns, and put all the risk in for that reward. Like Solitaire and Pong and Pac-Man and Among Us, a great game is one that takes its genre seriously and pushes the limits of what's possible within its own sandbox. The Witcher 3 may be another open-world action-adventure game, but it pushes itself on every single level and is a perfect example of masterful game design that every other development studio should strive to accomplish. But what do you guys think about all this? What game do you think is an example of masterful game design? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll check them out as soon as I possibly can. As always, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch this video, and make sure to have a good one. Little just one end. Yeah, skirt! This is an example song. This is an example song that I'm making for a video. Let's go.